So the Las Vegas Raiders have officially went out there and signed linebacker Christian Elliss, according to Tom Pelissero. He's putting it out there that the Raiders signed Patriots restricted free agent linebacker Christian Elliss to an offer sheet per The Wire. And of course, New England has until Monday to match. Let's talk about what this means for the Raiders as we go forward, because I think we got our starting linebacker right here. So if you guys don't know this, Christian Elliss was a restricted free agent with the New England Patriots. And the Patriots went ahead and tagged him with what is called the right of first refusal. Essentially, the Patriots are saying, hey, we weren't able to come to an actual agreement with this guy. So we'll go ahead and give him a minimum of $3.25 million. And with the right of first refusal, they also have the right to basically match any contract offer. And Christian Elliss does not get to decide, right? So Elliss is obviously went out there and signed with the Raiders. It's a $4 or $5 million contract. The Patriots can now match that contract. And if they do decide to match it, they have until Monday, according to Tom Pelissero. If they do end up matching that contract, essentially, Christian Elliss does not have a choice. He's going to be with the Patriots. However, the Patriots have went out and signed multiple other linebackers. They've spent big money as well on linebackers. And I don't think the Patriots are actually going to end up signing Christian Elliss. I think they've already kind of made the decision that they're going to move off of him. Right? I think they would have loved to have him back. And obviously, if they were able to make it work, it would have been great. But I think the Patriots also understand that Elliss may not actually want to be with the New England Patriots, right? And the Patriots obviously went out and brought in multiple other linebackers. I think they've signed 3 linebackers in this offseason so far. So that means the Raiders most likely have their starting linebackers who go into the 2025 NFL season. And I'm excited for this guy, man. You know, I watched more of his tape yesterday after I made my video, and I don't think I did enough justice for what this guy has shown on tape this past season. You know, he spent time with the Vikings, the Eagles, the Niners, most recently, obviously, with the New England Patriots. And he was obviously coached under Gerard Mayo, and he had a lot of success under him, right? And that's a former linebacker. It just kind of ties together. It just kind of makes sense. But what this guy flashed on tape this past season when he, you know, essentially got his first real opportunity in the NFL is he showed a guy that is smart. It's a guy that's instinctive. Right, it's a guy who understands leverage and angles, and he's able to kind of make plays on the football. And he made multiple plays this past season, especially in pass coverage. He had plays where he was just kind of all over these guys, and the quarterback didn't even test it or throw it towards his way. Right, this guy made so many good plays, and you know, I'm not surprised it took him a little while to kind of catch on. Right, he's 26 years old right now. In fact, he just turned 26 about 2 months back. But he came out of Idaho, right? So he didn't play at a super high, college where he was going to get a lot of recognition. He was a UDFA as well, which kind of makes sense. And it took him a couple of years, right? But multiple teams did give him an opportunity. When the Vikings essentially waived this guy, the Eagles quickly jumped in, right? The Eagles had seen his preseason tape with the Vikings, and they quickly said, we want to bring this guy in. The Eagles ended up releasing him because they needed a roster spot at some point in the season. The 49ers quickly jumped in. The 49ers needed a roster spot. They released him. The Eagles quickly brought him right back, right? The Eagles are like, hey, we want that guy back. And he spent a couple seasons with the Eagles, was on the practice squad a little bit. And then, of course, most recently, he ended up with the Patriots for 2 seasons. And in that second season, he got to essentially start. He had over 80 tackles. He had, I think, 1 or 2 forced fumbles. He had an interception, 4 or 5 pass breakups, multiple pressures, a couple sacks, and quarterback hits. The guy was just a really productive football player. And I think for the Raiders, you're bringing in a guy who has a ton of upside, right? This guy has absolutely massive upside, and we don't really know what he can actually develop into. But I really like this pickup. And I think for the Raiders, it's a low risk, high upside type of contract. Very similar to what we saw with Robert Spillane. You know, if you guys have followed this channel long enough, you guys know I've been saying this for the last 3 weeks. Linebacker is kind of a system position, right? You can have guys like Robert Spillane, you know, go from a team like the Steelers. It really doesn't click. There's some potential, but then he gets paired up with a good coach, and then that coach just kind of elevates his game a little bit. And then Robert Spillane ends up breaking out and being a top, 10 to 12 linebacker in the NFL. And we've seen so many of these different examples, right? Shaq Leonard, or Darius Leonard, or whatever you want to call him, he came to the Indianapolis Colts from South Carolina, had a phenomenal first 3 or 4 seasons, right? And then from that point, he lost his coach. I think Gus Bradley came in at some point. He didn't really fit that scheme. And then, his career kind of ended, right? And sometimes that happens with linebackers, right? You get with one coach and you have success. you go to a different coach, you don't have as much success. C.J. Mosley was with the Jets for years, and he was just kind of an average linebacker. And when Robert Saleh got there, and Robert Saleh gets a lot of credit for also developing Fred Warner. When Robert Saleh got to the Jets, C.J. Mosley's came with a completely different level, right? For the 2 years that Saleh was there. And again, it's just one of those things where linebacker's kind of a system position, where sometimes the coaching element of it makes a guy a lot better. We've seen what Mike Singletary's been able to do at that linebacker position, right? Not just as a player, but like as a coach, right? He coached Ray Lewis. Ray Lewis, one of the greatest linebackers ever. He went to the 49ers. He coached Patrick Willis, one of the greatest linebackers. Right? Even Navarro Bowman at one point was a phenomenal player. And that was all under Mike Singletary. And I don't know if Mike Singletary was Ray Lewis's initial coach. Right? Ray Lewis has also been really, really good. But Mike Singletary definitely helped those guys kind of elevate their game, right? So we've seen so many of these examples in the past. And I think for Patrick Graham to have already been able to have success with a guy like Robert Spillane, I hope he's able to kind of do that once again with Christian Elliss. We'll see what ends up happening as we kind of go forward. I'm excited for this one, as you guys can obviously see. The Raiders did make another move. We have a couple other updates that are kind of coming out. The Raiders went out and re-signed free agent defensive tackle Zach Carter, and I want to talk about this a little bit. Zach Carter came out of Florida in 2022 in the 2022 NFL Draft. So this is like his third year in the NFL, and it's kind of interesting because he's a third-round pick. He had a ton of upside, a ton of potential, and it never really worked out. And the Bengals ended up releasing this guy in the middle of this past season. The Raiders picked him up, and he was a pretty good run defender for the Raiders. Now, of course, he's still young, so he still has potential. He still has upside. He can continue to grow. Right? He's 6'4", 320 pounds. A really, really good frame. This guy has a ton of upside for the Raiders. And what's interesting is this guy was basically a free agent. Like, he could have walked, could have went and signed with any other team. And John Spytek, he watched his tape. Like, Spytek could have said, I don't want this guy. Right? Or Patrick Graham, whoever made that decision. Rob Leonard potentially could have said, this guy doesn't make sense. Let him walk. And the Raiders decided not to do that. They were impressed enough with this guy's tape. He didn't even play 300 snaps this past season. They were impressed enough with this guy's tape that they said, we want to bring this guy back. And I went back and I watched some of his tape earlier this morning. The guy definitely has some upside, right? Especially in the run game. I didn't really see a whole lot when it comes to pass rushing. Pass rushing is always going to be second to defending the run. I think for most D tackles, defending the run's a lot easier. Right? Pass rushing is a lot more difficult as a defensive tackle. It's why the great pass rushers at the D tackle position are going to get paid big money, right? But Zach Carter definitely showed some upside. He definitely showed some potential. And I think for the Raiders, this is once again low risk, high upside, right? Developmental, but there's potential there with this guy. Now, I'm not as excited for Zach Carter as I am for a guy like Christian Elliss, right? Obviously, with a guy like Elliss, there's a lot more upside, especially with what he did this past season. Right, what we saw this guy kind of breaking out this past season. With Carter, we got to remember, right? He's coming back to the same scheme, the same system, the same coaching staff. So it's just another guy that kind of understands the system and scheme. And it's another guy that the Raiders feel like can potentially rotate in, be a role player. Maybe he plays 400 snaps this season. He'll play, 10, 11 snaps a game over the course of this season. And to me, I think, again, low risk, high upside. I don't think he's as good as Christian Elliss, but it is what it is. I'm excited for this one. And then we got two more updates coming out here. The first is that the Raiders' former center, Andre James, has officially signed with the Los Angeles Chargers. I want to talk about what this means for the Chargers as they kind of get into it. Plus, I saw a lot of people talking shit about Andre James on Twitter, and I just want to kind of talk about it a little bit. And Andre James was with the Raiders for like 5 or 6 seasons. He was here for a number of years. He came out of UCLA. He was a tackle in college. Came to the Raiders. Tom Cable, the offensive line coach at that time, wanted to turn this guy into a center, essentially, right? And Andre James sat for, I think, 2 years behind Rodney Hudson, and then he eventually developed. The Raiders got rid of Rodney Hudson. Andre James stepped in, I believe, in 2021, and he was a pretty solid starter for the Raiders for about 3 to 4 years, right? And generally speaking, he was here for like 6 years. And to see people talk negatively about Andre James, I cannot agree with that at all. I know Andre James wasn't great the past 2 seasons, and he really fell off this past season. Jackson Powers-Johnson obviously ended up replacing him. But he was still one of those guys that came in every single day. He put the work in. He put the effort in. He wanted to win, obviously, right? And he came to the Raiders in hopes of being able to win and kind of have success. And hold down that position for a long time, right? He did get a contract with the Chargers, and I am happy for Andre James personally. He was a guy that I really liked when he kind of came over, and we saw him in preseason his rookie year. I liked him, right? I thought he was a good player, and he could eventually start down the line. And we'll see if he can actually end up starting for the Chargers. The Chargers have 2 centers now. They're basically 2 Andre James caliber players. One of them will end up starting. It will be interesting to see if James can kind of bounce back and kind of, come back together to the player he once was, right? We'll see what ends up happening. But I did want to just bring that update out that he obviously did sign with the Los Angeles Chargers. It does suck that it's the Chargers, but it's the Chargers, right? They don't do much winning. And then let's wrap this up a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about the NFL draft. Mel Kiper to me is the best draft analyst that's out there. I know some people will disagree with that, but we do have to be realistic. This guy's been doing it for like 30 years. You're going to be wrong sometimes, right? It's just what it is. It's just how mock drafts and those type of things work. Daniel Jeremiah, also a pretty solid draft analyst. I still think Mel Kiper is better, but they're both very, very good, right? Mel Kiper works for ESPN. Daniel Jeremiah works for NFL.com. Both of them are the 2 top dogs at those 2 respective networks. Both guys have the Raiders taking Ashton Jeanty in their most recent mock draft, which, to me is kind of interesting, right? I'm gonna read out what both of these guys kind of had to say. So Mel Kiper obviously believes that the Raiders are going to pick Ashton Jeanty after they traded for Geno Smith. Mel Kiper said that Pete Carroll wasn't waiting until the draft to find his quarterback after Las Vegas had the number 13 pick last year and missed on all 6 of the first-round quarterbacks. The team went out and traded for Geno Smith before free agency kicked off. He also went in to say, so I'm going to give the Raiders the best player still available on my board. That is going to be Ashton Jeanty, who he has as his number 4 player. And he says the following. Jeanty is the elusiveness, the speed, the physicality, the vision with the ball in his hands. Jeanty really has it all. He rushed for 2,600 yards, 29 touchdowns last season. Plus, he has some pass catching upside with 66 catches over the past 2 campaigns. The Raiders were last in rushing last season, averaging 3.6 yards per carry and 79.8 per game. Jeanty will change everything there and create a solid offensive nucleus with Smith, Jacoby Myers, and Brock Bowers. I don't disagree with what he's saying, to be honest with you guys. And Daniel Jeremiah kind of says the same thing, right? The Raiders can take some pressure off of Geno Smith by adding Jeanty, who is the top 3 player in the NFL draft. That is what Daniel Jeremiah says. So I want to just talk about what these 2 guys are kind of saying, because it is interesting to think, could the Raiders actually take a running back with the 6th overall pick? And it's not just a running back, right? That's just kind of selling this guy short. Ashton Jeanty is one of the best offensive weapons in the draft, right? Ashton Jeanty is one of the top 2 players on the offensive side in the entire draft. Travis Hunter, Ashton Jeanty, 1A, 1B, however you want to look at it. Those 2 guys are completely different. Now, I think Travis Hunter will be gone. I think he'll be the first non-quarterback taken. If not, he'll be the second right after Abdul Carter. And then I think Jeanty's right there in the mix as well. But we could see teams reaching for quarterbacks, which means there's a chance Jeanty is actually available on the board. And I'm going to be the first to tell you guys, or I'm going to give you why I would take Jeanty and why I hesitate. And I lean a little bit stronger, more towards hesitating with Ashton Jeanty. I love Ashton Jeanty. He's the best running back in this class. He's the next Saquon Barkley caliber running back, right? We got Saquon, we got Bijan Robinson, and Ashton Jeanty's going to be in that class, right? It's tier 1, those 3 guys, that's it, right? Ashton Jeanty to me is a phenomenal football player. You can just watch the tape and you can just see this guy with the vision, the way he's able to run full speed, stop himself, turn, and just quickly get back up to full speed, and he's gone. And it's part of what allowed him to have 2,600 yards. And it's not just the yards. This guy averages more yards than every other running back that has over 100 carries. This guy averages more broken tackles over every other running back that has over 100 carries. This guy has more forced missed tackles than every other running back. Right? That right there is something you can't fake. People are going to say this guy has so many carries, which is why his yards look good. But the per rush, the broken tackles, making people miss, right? Just the elusiveness, and those stats don't lie, right? And you can say he played at Boise State, but he also had Boise State offensive linemen blocking for him, right? Plus, he had a couple of really, really good games against Oregon. He had a couple other really good games against some good teams as well. We also have to realize that, teams come to play Boise, and they stack the box, and they're going to say, we need to shut down Ashton Jeanty, right? The guy's definitely a difference maker, but I do hesitate with taking a guy like Jeanty. And the reason why I think Ashton Jeanty is one of those guys that I personally hesitate with a little bit is because although he's a great running back, he is still a running back, and you're still super reliant on your offensive line. You're reliant on the run game, right? The guy that's going to design that run game, right? The run game coordinator, oftentimes it's the offensive line coach. You're going to rely a lot on that guy, the offensive coordinator, right? All of those things really impact the running back. You can have Devon Achane be the best running back in the NFL under Mike McDaniel, and then go be paired up with Josh McDaniel and not be as good, right? It's just what it is. Sometimes the scheme is a lot more important than the running back. And don't get me wrong, right? We saw what Saquon Barkley did when he went from the Giants to the Philadelphia Eagles. We saw the difference, right? He went from averaging like 4.5 yards with the Giants to almost 6 yards with the Eagles. But the thing with the Raiders is we're probably closer to the Giants offensive line than we are to the Eagles offensive line. So again, I hesitate with taking a guy like Ashton Jeanty, right? To me, the Raiders offensive line, although there's some good pieces, right, we have a great left tackle, we have a great center. Our left guard, right tackle are questionable as hell at this point. We don't know how good the offensive line is going to be. Now, don't get it wrong, right? If the offensive line clicks, if it ends up being good, and you draft Ashton Jeanty, he can have so much success for this team. And you bring in Ashton Jeanty, it's going to make it that much easier for Geno Smith. But is it that big of a difference if you bring in Caleb Johnson or Amarian Hampton or RJ Harvey in the second, third, or fourth round? Is it going to be would those guys not make it easier for Geno Smith either, right? And I understand Ashton Jeanty is going to be better than those guys, but I just hesitate with taking a running back with pick 6, especially since running backs generally last 5 to 7 years. If you take a starting caliber right tackle with the 6th overall pick, he'll play for 12 to 15 years. If you take a starting caliber wide receiver, he might play for 10 years. He might play for 12 years. Running backs don't last as long, right? And the usage aspect of it, there's just so much that kind of happens with running backs. I hesitate with taking Ashton Jeanty because of that. Now, don't get it wrong. If the Raiders were comfortable with that pick, I'd be 100% comfortable with it as well. I just think DNs, tackles, receivers matter a little bit more. Receivers are similar to running backs in the sense that they rely on a different position. But for the Raiders, we have Geno Smith, right? We have a quarterback that can get the ball to our wide receiver. So we'll see what the Raiders end up doing, but I did find it interesting that Ashton Jeanty is being mocked to the Las Vegas Raiders. We obviously need new running backs, right? We don't really have much going for us right now, but we'll see what ends up happening, man. Thumbs up, subscribe. Let me know what you guys think about some of what's kind of happened today. And I'll see you guys next time with another video.